To make a sweater like this, which is kind of a raglan inspired puffy sleeve funky thing, I did it all on one circular needle, and you just kind of do it in parts. So you start at the neck and you cast on. I'm going to cast on 50. So you're going to want to take a pair of circular needles. These are size 13, I believe, and you do a long tail cast on. So you make a slip knot, leaving a tail that's long enough to knit on 50 stitches, which we're going to do. So this is how you do a slip knot. You pull it through, and then I'm just showing again. Loop through, and then you pull that loop, and you get the loop around tighten. And then if you pull on one of the strings, it adjusts it so that that knot can sit comfortably on the needle without being too tight or too loose, and you can adjust it. So just like that. And then you make this kind of diamond shape with your thumb and your finger, and you loop under your thumb, under your finger, and through. So again, under your thumb, under your finger, and then through the loop. So you just want to do that again and again until you have 50 stitches. And again, I highly recommend just searching long tail cast on YouTube, and someone will show you in excruciating detail how to do this if you don't know how to do it yet. So make sure to count your stitches. And once you do, line it up on the needle going through the loop so that the knitting sides of the yarn are together. And you want to make sure that the knit part is all on the inside of the needles, or else you might get it twisted into this kind of Mobius strip thing where you're knitting on the top side of half of it and the bottom side of the other half. So that's super important that the knots are all on the same side. Then you just knit one row. This is the knit stitch. To do this video, you only need to know how to knit and purl, and that should cover it. There's cast on and cast off. So once you've knit your entire round, just once around, then you start to do a ribbed collar. So that's going to be knit 2, purl 2, or knit 3, purl 3, and you do that all the way around. And make sure that the knit part is still all on the same side of your needle. So you knit 2, and this is just a slower example than before of how to do it. Also, the lighting keeps changing because it's taking me hours to film this. So now the lamp's on here. So there's your knit 2, and then you take the yarn to the front side and you purl 2. Yeah, I really can't plug the old lady knitting tutorial women of YouTube. It's really quite a community. I wish my grandma could help me, but she says she can't do it over FaceTime. So you just knit around here like this a couple of rows until it's long enough, maybe like an inch or 2 inches for your collar. So then once you have your collar, and then you do all your increases. When you increase, it's going to look like this, so you get this kind of nice, like, bar as it goes out. So you make 2 stitch markers on the front and on the back. You see there's the increases on both sides. The sweater's symmetrical because it's all knit on one loop. Once you get that part, then under the armpit, after you hold your stitches, so these stitches here on the sleeve, you can't see where the seam is, but it's going to be held on a stitch holder, which looks like a giant safety pin. You then don't have any sleeves to deal with, and you're basically here on your round. So you add some stitches under the armpit. This one, I think I added 15. You can do 8, you can do 4, depending on how wide you want the body and the sleeves to be. And then you just knit all the way down to the bottom. And then I switched colors here for the bottom, but you don't have to. And you can then just, for however many rows you want, I think this is, you can count them by seeing kind of how many V's there are. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of ribbed on the bottom, and then you just knit ribbed there, and then you bind off. So to do the sleeve, you turn it inside out, you pick up the stitches, and then like the body, you just knit all the way down. And you can change colors in here. The one that I'm working on in the video has stripes. That's fun. You can do checkerboard stuff. There's a lot of stuff you can do. I'm gonna keep it kind of simple here because I don't know how to explain things that I have to go on YouTube to check every time I want to knit them. But I think you can get a pretty solid sweater on your first try, which is pretty exciting. When you get down to the wrist here, you can decrease stitches to get the nice balloon effect so that when you put it on your arm, it's tight around your wrist. And poofy. I think that looks fun. So when you get here, you just decrease every stitch. So you pick up 2 every time you knit instead of 1. And then you do ribbing on the cuff all the way down, and then you bind off again, and then you just repeat that on the other sleeve, and that's it. So yeah. So again, I'm just showing you pick up 2 stitches, and make sure not to take the short end of your tail that you're just leaving there to weave in later. And make sure you take the part of the tail that's attached to the ball of yarn, and then you just knit normally, but instead of knitting 1 stitch, you pick up 2 from the part that's already on the needle. So you can see the orange there. You pick up 2, knit, and then you just do that for a row, and that makes it half as wide. So once you have 1 row of that, you move your stitch marker. Also, I'm using string as stitch markers, if you can see. Anything goes, rings, whatever. So then you do a rib stitch for the rest of the wrist, just like you did in the neck and at the hem. So knit 2, purl 2, or knit 3, purl 3, whichever you prefer. If you want it wider, do more. If you want it narrower, do less. So there I'm just purling 2 stitches. And I unfortunately really can't stress how helpful it is to just go online and look up videos. I need to do that for everything. Yeah, but then it looks like this in the end, which is great, and you bind it off. And now I like using these giant child needles that I found in my parents' house because they're kind of practice needles, so they're really thick, and they're thick enough to pick up yarn. You can also buy a tapestry needle, but you weave in your ends like that. You just kind of sew them in, and they don't show up on the front, and that's kind of it. I tie double, triple knots, whatever, to make sure that it stays safe. So then you need to do that with the armpit. So you turn your work the right side out and you stitch it up. And I do a little bit of like a jiggling through, like I get to the top and then stitch it together. There's really proper ways to do this. I'm not doing a proper way. It works out fine for me. I've made up my own stitch. But if you want to learn how to do it the right way, you can look up pattern books and, again, YouTube. Yeah, but so then you stitch this up, and then when you do your last stitch, you turn it inside out and tie your knot and weave it in again, so that all your tails on the whole sweater are woven in. And that's kind of it. That's the end of your sweater, and it was surprisingly doable.